Good afternoon and welcome to episode 8 in our Zoom Lunch and Learn series. My name is Jennifer Lucy and I'm the Managing Director of Programs here at TextProtects, and we are so glad that you have joined us today. Today, we're going to be talking about the biological mechanisms and impact of stress and trauma on our children, how that might be impacting their behavior and their ability to connect, and most importantly, strategies that we can use as the adults in the room to help them regulate and connect so that they can learn new skills and thrive. We're so excited to have that conversation today. We are at TextProtects working on child protection issues really across the spectrum. And so for those of you that may be new to us, TextProtect's mission is to protect Texas children from the trauma of abuse and neglect and empower families to thrive through education, research, and advocacy. And so part of that work is empowering families, providers, lawmakers with the information that they need to make good decisions by our youngest children and ensure their safety and well-being across their lifespan. I'm going to jump in and introduce our presenter, speaker, teacher for today. Ms. Ana Valdez joins us from Fostering Hope, and as I said, this is the third in a series, and so if you've joined us before, you know that you're in for a treat. Ana is the Director of Programs at Fostering Hope, and she'll tell you a little bit about their work as she gets started this morning. But she has a ton of experience in working directly with children and families, is trained in multiple trauma-informed sort of certifications and approaches, and now is able to really take that knowledge and that experience and help organizations and systems, as well as families and providers, in transform to a more trauma-informed approach. And she has taught me so much already over the course of this webinar, and I know you're going to learn a lot from her as well. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ana. Thank you so much for joining us today. And to all of you, enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm so happy to be with you all today, and it's kind of bittersweet because it's my last time. But I've had so much fun getting to work with you all and also meeting a whole new different crowd of participants. So yeah, as Jennifer mentioned, I am the Director of Programs at Fostering Hope. And we are a nonprofit located in Austin, and we really strive to do three things. And that is first, help people engage in the foster care system and find their place. We believe that everyone has a part to play with our most vulnerable kids in our community. Another thing we do is that we equip those that are already serving kids in the foster care system or kids that have been adopted. And a lot of that is through things like this, education for parents, for professionals, for volunteers, mentors, anyone that touches the life of a child. And the third thing we do is we're involved in innovative projects that help strengthen the system and find gaps in the system, and we try to meet those with community collaboration. So I'm so excited to be here with y'all for the third time, and I'm going to talk about one of my favorite topics. I know I said that last time, but really, I really like talking about regulation, whether that is regulation of the adult or the parent or regulation of the child. And what you'll probably find me saying this multiple times today, but I really find it to be true. I have worked with a lot of teenagers, and I have a lot of experience, and most of my experience is working with teens. And I have found that in our field, we're kind of scared of teens. Like, we don't want to approach them. There's this myth of like, you know, just foster babies, just adopt babies. It's going to be easier. But I really think that if we understood regulation a little better and we understood how to build skills to help a child regulate, that we would be a little less afraid of teens and what they bring to a relationship, right? And I'm talking about teens that have experienced trauma, teens that are in care. The older child that most people, is just, that's just what happened. Most kids that jump from home to home, or most kids that are available for adoption, they're older kids, right? Because we'll see a little bit more difficult behavior and things like that with them. So let's jump right in and let's talk about regulation. I think most of us believe when we come to a relationship with a child, whether that's a professional relationship, maybe you're a teacher, maybe you're part of a nonprofit that has a program for kids and families, or you're a parent. When we come to a relationship with a child that has experienced trauma, we usually find ourselves saying and believing they should be able to do this, right? Why can't they focus? Why can't they understand? Why can't they be flexible, adaptable, stable, go with the changes that are happening? Why can't they stay socially connected to me or to their friends, right? These are all things that we believe they should be able to do. And this has to do with regulation. A lot of it, a lot of times it has to do with regulation. And again, especially if they're older, they come into our lives and we see a taller child that looks healthier, taller than us. They look healthy. They're beautiful. That was my experience, right? I had taller girls, beautiful girls. And I found that they could not do some of these things. They did not know how to regulate themselves, to focus on the task at hand, right? To be flexible, to be adaptable. And I thought, because of their age, because of what I saw right in front of me, they should be able to do that. So we're going to start by kind of confronting how we view kids, right, on the outside, how we view their behaviors, particularly dysregulation, and what is really going on the inside that we cannot see, okay? So think about this. How do you view a dysregulated child? And you can have a little conversation with the participants in the chat if you wish. Type in there, pop in there and say, what do you see when you see a dysregulated child? I have heard parents say, like, they are rebellious, they know what to do, they just don't want to do it. They just want to hurt me, right? They're just not listening to the instructions. We tend to think those things just traditionally when we see kids on the outside when a child is dysregulated, right? They get a label of the bad child or the hyper child or the uncontrollable child. They walk into class maybe or into your program and you kind of breathe deeply because it's going to be a harder day than what you anticipated. Yeah, someone in the chat mentioned that they look like trouble. So I want to challenge you with how we look at their behaviors, right? And let's think about a tree with branches and its roots. Many times when we see a dysregulated child and that behavior that comes with it, what we want to do and the tools that we use is we simply want to cut off that behavior, right? So we think of the branches on this tree like behavior. What we do is we just cut off the branch, right? And we will give them a punishment and we'll give them a consequence. And we'll make more rules. We'll try to control more, right? To cut off that behavior or that branch. But let me ask you this. Have you ever cut off the branches of a tree? What happens after some time? Maybe after spring comes again. What happens, as the time passes and as we go in through a new phase, right? Well, the branch just grows back, because the only way to truly cut off that behavior or stop that behavior is to go to the root, right? My parents, a few years ago, they had to remove a tree that was right outside their house. It was a huge tree. It was starting to affect their foundation of their home. So to remove that tree and all its roots that had been there for years and years and years, they had to hire people. It cost money. It took a long time. It was a lot of work. There was machinery on their front yard as they dug that pit to uproot that tree. And that is really how we should be looking at behavior. Trauma-informed care goes to look at the root of the behavior. It doesn't do simple, traditional things, maybe like cutting off the branches and putting harsh consequences and using a chart with a bunch of X's. I don't know if you've ever tried to do that. I definitely tried that. Guess what, guys? It doesn't work. But what we should be doing, and what I want to challenge you to do today as we're together for this hour, is look at these behaviors, at these dysregulated behaviors as coming from somewhere. Ask yourself, what is the need, right? What do I need to do to meet the need at the root, right? And try to address this behavior at the root, taking into account the child's story, right? And so let's go deeper at how trauma impacts this dysregulation. Here are some of the things that we might have believed, right? When we started working with kids with trauma, or we started parenting kids with trauma. And you can tell me if this is true of what you thought or not. Because traditionally, again, we go to those branches, right? We think it's going to be one certain way. We tend to think this child's need will be like the need of any other child that I've parented or worked with. If you were here on our previous webinars, you heard me share a story that, I was a teacher before I started working directly with kids who had trauma, and I thought I could do the same thing that I did in the classroom, and it didn't work. It didn't work. So this might be something you are thinking. You might think this child is going to love me back. This child is going to be easy to connect with because I'm going to love this child and I'm going to connect with this child. And you might find it difficult, especially when the child is dysregulated, to connect. You might find it difficult to show love to the child, to have patience with the child, right? So these are some of the things that I kind of want to bring out and point out that are in the back of our mind as we're trying to look at the root, right? If we're thinking this way, we might just be seeing the branches, right? But trauma-informed care or being trauma-informed is really a journey of understanding to grow our compassion and our skills for kids that have experienced trauma. So in order to understand regulation, right, or dysregulation and how that works, we must understand trauma's impact. And trauma, I know we probably have heard this word a lot and what it is and try to define it and understand it, but trauma is less about an experience than it is about the body's reaction and change because of that experience, right? So trauma reorganizes your stress system. It reorganizes the meaning of things. And that's really what we're left to parent after trauma has happened, right? We're left to parent how trauma has changed their body, how trauma has changed the capacity for learning, their stress system's response, how trauma has delayed their development to be up to half their age, right? Half their chronological age. And that goes back to things that we cannot see, right? We see a healthy child in front of us. But on the inside, we cannot see that their brain structure is very different. The skills that they can or cannot do are very different than a typical child their age. Right? And attachment is impacted. That's the ability to relate, right? The pattern of relationship that they have. So trauma is an profound rupture, right? There's a rupture in safety, in relationship, in so many things, and that was never repaired. So now we're left to deal with these things, or to parent these types of things, because of what trauma does, right? The body's response to trauma. So we're not going to go too deep into the brain, so don't let this scare you. I really love talking about the science of the brain, but I want to focus on two parts today to just help us understand regulation, right? So we have this brain here is the side view, so it's as if I were looking this way. We have that frontal lobe, that prefrontal cortex, that does all these good things that you see listed here. It helps you reason and helps you use logic and language to speak, right? It helps you with the interpretation of cues and to regulate your body. But a child who has experienced trauma, or anyone, right, that has experienced childhood trauma, their prefrontal cortex has been delayed in development, because they've had to use the back part of their brain so much in order to survive. So if we see the little part by the brainstem here, the amygdala, they've had to use that fear center brain so much. It's been online, it's been active. All their energy has been used in that way, right, to survive what has happened to them, that this prefrontal lobe is underdeveloped because of it. So if you think about it, us adults, we're really funny, right? We want kids to use all those good things. We want them to reason with us and to use logic and to be able to follow instructions and all these things that we think they should be able to do, or we want them to be able to do. But in reality, that is really difficult for them. And when a child is dysregulated, they're in the back part of their brain, we have to help them regulate to turn on that area, this prefrontal area, so that that could begin to develop and mature and heal, because healing is possible. And the more they have that on, the more that we can help them regulate and relax, the more optimal development that they can have, the more that they can develop that part. So that's really what we're trying to do when we talk about regulating a child, right? This ties very, very closely to a child's healing, to what we can't see even that's going on inside of their brain. So let's look at regulation 3 ways in our time together. Let's look at how self-regulation is learned, or how regulation is learned. Let's look at connection and how it contributes to regulation, and how to teach skills, regulation skills, to a child proactively. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about attachment, because regulation is a skill learned through relationship. So attachment, especially very early on in life, right? The first year of life is optimal for attachment, is the time where the child learns more about attachment. It's a very important what happens between the caregiver and the child. It's very important. There's so much that is communicated and learned by the child based on that experience with their primary caregiver, whether that was mom or dad or grandma or foster mom, adoptive mom, whoever was the primary caregiver of that child at the time. So we're going to keep it simple. We're not going to go too deep today. But let's think about an infant, right? The first year of life. And what do babies do when they have a need? They cry, right? And it's kind of one of the most frustrating sounds for us as adults. Like, does anybody here ever put on baby cries at night to help you fall asleep and relax? I don't think so, because what happens on the inside of that child is there are hormones being released, like cortisol, stressing the baby out when they cry. And these hormones, the baby's brain is telling them, like, get someone to come and meet your need, because if someone doesn't come, you're in trouble. It's kind of like a threat to the baby. That is supposed to elicit a response from the caregiver, from parents, right? A baby cries right away. You see mama get up, go to the crib. Oh, what happened? What do you need, right? Because that's what it's supposed to do. The caregiver meets the need of the child, and then trust develops, right? More hormones are released, like dopamine, that make the child feel good, and the brain can relax. Now, how many times do you think this cycle happens the first year of life? Thousands and thousands, right? If you've ever had a baby at home, you know that the baby cries in the middle of the night, in the middle of the day, just with no pattern, right? There's always some sort of need. But this relationship is so important, right? This interpersonal relationship, it really teaches a child, it gives the message of the child, this is how I regulate. This is what hunger feels like. This is what loneliness feels like. This is what I feel when I have a need for someone to interact with me. And here are some things that I can do. They really learn a lot through the context of this relationship, right? But many of our kids that have experienced trauma, especially those in the foster care system, those that have been adopted early on in life, they did not have access to a consistent, warm caregiver that could meet their needs. And that has impacted their regulation. The lack of that consistent, warm caregiver that couldn't teach them these skills has impacted their ability to be able to regulate later on in life. So how does regulation work, right? Again, it's a skill learned through relationship, a skill learned through attachment. And many of our kids that have experienced trauma have missed it. They've missed this. So it's really in 3 phases. And the key here is that you can't skip a phase. Like if you didn't have phase 1, there's no way that you can get to phase 3. You have to go through phase 1, then phase 2, then phase 3. It's like scaffolded, right? It's built on top of each other. So the first phase is external regulation. And this is where the primary caregiver meets all the needs of the child, right? Think about that baby crying. Someone from the outside, when the baby cries, has to come and meet the need of the child. They have to feed it, and they have to clothe it, and they have to cradle it, right? And comfort it. That is all external regulation. Now, there comes a point in the child's life that maybe they learn some of their first words, right? Maybe they say, "Mama," and the child communicates something to the mom. And then it's mom and child working together to meet the need of the child, right? So the child goes, "Mama," and mama looks down and says, "Oh, you want me to pick you up? Oh, yes, I love you so much," right? So the child senses a need to be picked up, to be comforted, and mom or caregiver and child work together to meet their need. That is co-regulation. That's a second phase. Then there comes the point in the child's life, right, where they sense they need something, and they can get that on their own. They know how to meet their need, right? They no longer have to ask you for, water. They're thirsty. They feel thirsty. They know what they need. They walk to the fridge. They pour themselves a cup of milk and they drink it. That is regulating themselves. That's meeting their need. They feel kind of sad, kind of lonely. They know that they can call a friend and talk to them and tell them how they're feeling, right? That is a major skill, to be able to sense what you're feeling, know what it is, and be able to meet that need, right? Do you know any grown-ups that still don't know how to self-regulate? That is really hard. It's a hard skill. And it's only learned through a relationship. It's learned by being scaffolded. So, trauma-informed care is going back to what these kids missed to what our kids missed and filling in those gaps, right? Giving them what they missed. So now with the kids that we serve, the kids in our programs, in our classrooms, or in our homes, we must have a regulatory relationship. There's going to be all sorts of feelings, all sorts of needs, whether that's a physical need or an emotional need. And especially if the child is new to us and new to learning some of these skills, we're going to have to maybe meet all their needs externally, right? Cook all their meals, plan their day out. And this will be hard, y'all. It's hard when the child is older. It's easier when the child is younger because it feels natural. It's what we do naturally. But if you think about a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old or a teen that you have to externally regulate sometimes, that might feel unnatural to us, the adults. So think about it this way. It's more about us than really about them. The reason why it's harder is because it feels unnatural to us. Like, you should be able to do this. I shouldn't have to help you with this. And then as they get better, right, in relationship with us, as they get better with these skills, then we can co-regulate. We can ask them to use their words, to tell us what they're feeling, maybe what they need, and we can meet that need together, right? We can give them some coping skills. We can make a calming plan. And then hopefully when they're ready, they can self-regulate, right? They can have the skills to be in a healthy relationship, be healthy parents themselves, to be able to self-regulate. So this is really what a regulatory relationship looks like. And I want to stress one more time. I think if we understood this a little bit better and we just kind of accepted the uncomfortable, unnatural nature of doing this with an older child, we could understand that older child a little bit better. So as you can see with the regulatory relationship, connection is key, right? What you do, what the caregiver does, what the healthy, safe adult does is key. Always remember, you are the bigger, better person here, right? So you have more responsibility as the adult. When you are calm, you can help transfer that calm to the child. If we have a child that's dysregulated, and then we are dysregulated, we haven't met our own needs, and we talked a lot about that last time, but you will not be able to calm a child down. It won't happen, right? Two dysregulated brains cannot work together, right? So if you are calm, you are going to be better able to transfer that calm. So if you're maybe a teacher, I would be so ready to go into that classroom with that child that I know is going to need me, right? If I am running a program for kids that have experienced trauma, I want to make sure I get my needs met before I walk into that room where we're all going to be together. If my child is coming, is home, right? I want to make sure that I build in self-care to myself. If I have to have a very important conversation that I know that they might get dysregulated or angry, I'm going to make sure I have my needs met before I approach that conversation, right? So when you are calm, you are better able to transfer calm. Think about these things: tone, cadence, volume of your voice, right? Eye contact, and healthy touch. Because when a child is in their fear brain, when they're dysregulated and they're in their back primitive brain, fight, flight, or freeze mode kind of thing, they are going to really be able to read what's going on here, right? And that will either prompt them to feel more relaxed and calm or to feel more threatened, right? So if our volume is too high, if our cadence is too fast and we are talking like this, it's going to be hard for us to transfer that calm, right? So think about those things. What am I communicating with this? What am I communicating with my eyes? A lot of us adults like to peer down at kids. And that could be really threatening for some of our kids. We like that eye contact, like for respect, right? We think it's, you know, look at me, respect me. But think about eye contact as, you know, the kind of eye contact that you give a baby right here, right? A newborn baby, right? You look at them, y'all look at each other in your eyes, and you talk like this. And it's a connecting eye contact, not like a, hey, look at me because I'm talking to you kind of eye contact. Healthy touch. When a child is dysregulated, you know, make sure you know how close you can get to them. And the more you know the child, the more you'll know about that. Ask if you can touch them. And if they say no, accept that no, because again, getting too close or touching that could be more threatening than calming for the child. Use behavioral matching. This kind of has to do with that co-regulation, right? Do what the child is doing. Co-regulate with them. If the child is seated down, sit down as they are, right? Don't tower over them. If the child is drinking water, drink water with them. If we have given maybe the child, you know, a piece of gum to help them calm down, we can chew gum with them, right? Just anything that'll help us match, anything that'll help us kind of be doing the same thing. Be playful as much as possible. Don't go straight to strict authoritative mode, right? That will not help a child regulate. Traditionally, that's where we tend to go, right? When we see those branches of behavior sticking out and needing to be cut off, we tend to go to the strict, controlling, wanting to make more rules for everybody mode. But the more that you can remain, you know, playful, the more that you can try to get a child to smile with you, the more that you'll help them regulate. Because smiling, when a child is smiling with you, when a child is playing with you, right? When you say a quick joke and they smile and they laugh at that, that is the opposite of being in fear mode, right? There's no way they're in fear mode. You have now helped them kind of relax, right? So that is always key. I am so jealous of people who are so good at this, right? People that can just say something quick and you see someone smile. But that's a skill that, you know, I really need to work on. Okay, let's talk about having a calming plan. Bruce Perry says that when kids are dysregulated, we should use pattern, repetition, and rhythm to help them regulate. And that has to do with movement. We are used, as adults, we're used to regulating with our minds, especially the healthier that we are, right? We're used to kind of talking to ourselves and saying, you know what, just relax, drink some water, calm down, everything's gonna be okay, and just try to get through this, right? That is trying to help us regulate. But a child who has experienced trauma cannot do that. They cannot regulate with their mind. That's using your prefrontal cortex. That's using logic, right? Like, I'm gonna get through this and it's gonna be okay. A child cannot do that. So we need to help them with a pattern, with a repetition, with rhythm, right? Using the movement of their body is the best. Using pressure on their body, like a weighted blanket or something that's heavy, is the best, right? For teenagers, using lifting weights, I would encourage, even though they were girls, I would encourage my girls, you know, to lift weights and to get exercise, because I know that that's regulating their bodies. And that needs to be incorporated when we talk about having a calming plan. And I also want to talk about that word, like calming. We need to use what works for our kids, right? So if calming doesn't work because we've used that calm down so much and now it's like not even a positive word anymore, then maybe we need to use soothing, or maybe we need to use me time, or maybe we need to use relax, right? Just play around with what works for this child or for your family. And places or things that we might need a calming plan for is, and you'll get to know this as as you get to know the child better, you'll get to know, okay, I need to make a plan for this. We need to have repetition here, or a way of doing this. It could be transitions. We'll see a lot of behavioral issues during transitions when we are stopping one activity and starting a new activity, right? Like starting school, or getting home from school, or going to bed at night. Those are all daily transitions, right? So it might be certain foods, certain times of day, certain people and places. I was working with a foster family. I was doing in-home coaching with them. And they had a little 1-year-old baby who was very delayed in development. So he could barely sit up on his own. He obviously didn't talk and couldn't communicate at all. But every night around sunset, this child used to cry and cry and cry. And a foster mom was talking to me about this, and she said, all I try to do is soothe him and calm him down, and it happens every day. And we didn't know why, right? But we knew that now this was a pattern, and this, like, we have to plan for this. We have to help him through this. Well, it turned out after further investigation in the case that this baby boy, every day around sunset, he would get locked in a closet with his siblings when he was not in the foster home. So before he came to the foster home, that's what would happen to this baby boy every day. So guess what? His body was telling him the time of day is coming. So simply the sun going down, his body was sensing something is about to happen. And he hadn't been long enough with the foster family to realize I'm safe now, right? He was very dysregulated by the time of day. So it could really be anything that we don't understand. Trauma really changes the meaning of things that sometimes it doesn't make sense to us, and we don't really have to know the story because we're going to implement the same strategies anyway, right? That's where it comes into, into our mind, like we don't know what is going on the inside, even though we see everything's okay on the outside. So there's the daily transitions that we talked about, and there's also life transitions, like this whole doing school at home. That's a major life transition. Not being able to see friends, that's a major life transition. Changing schools, that might be a major life transition. Changing homes, right? That is a major life transition. So be ready to see this regulation during these times and have a plan for that. Also, when we have overwhelming emotions like anger, sadness, loneliness, if we see there's a pattern, right? Some kids are not great at losing games. Kids that have experienced trauma, right? It really attacks like their self-esteem, and we'll see some dysregulation happen when they're out of the game or they lose something. And we try to calm them down with our words, and we say, it's okay to lose, you got to accept to lose. But, right, maybe they need to have a pattern, a repetition, maybe a phrase that you say the same way every time, right? They lose a game, maybe we do a high five and we say, I am still worthy, or I am still valuable, or mama still loves you, whatever it might be that works for your family, right? It's a pattern, it's repetitive, and it has a rhythm, and you use relationship, right? When it's you and the child together. So that might be something that you'll have to do for kids who don't have the skills yet to self-regulate. Here's another thing. I'm going to go quickly because I know that we want to have some time for Q&A, but this comes from TBRI. And this is what you can do to teach skills proactively. So if you're trying to teach a child, right, how to maybe use their voice to express their needs, anything like that, you'll want to use a script, which is, a short phrase of words. And then you'll see some examples there that you use all the time. And you'll want to do role playing, which could be really fun, or you practice the wrong way first, and then you practice the right way, right? And let the kid be the adult that's correcting you, or and you be the kid, or use puppets or use your stuffed animals. I have seen puppets. They were actually used with my girls that were teenagers to teach skills, and it works with teenagers. So if you think puppets might not work, listen, they like playing around like that. So it might be harder for a teen to kind of role play. It might be like shameful, or they might be shy or embarrassed, but sometimes when you give them a puppet, they're okay with that. They can role play with that. So this is also a tool that you can use to kind of make a plan and start teaching your kids these skills. We want to use that regulation model, right? So when we're teaching skills, it's going to be a lot of intentional, external regulation, and then we can go to co-regulation and self-regulation. Remember that these three things have to happen, and it takes time. And they didn't have it, especially, if they're in the system, in the foster care and the adoptive system, they didn't have it for a large part of their life. So we want to make sure that we give enough time to externally regulate when they're new to a relationship with us, to co-regulate, right? Where we work together to meet the needs in order for them to self-regulate. We might have to lower our bar. And this kind of goes with, what I've been talking about. When we see an older child that we say, you know what, they should be able to do this. Why can't they do this? Why can't they focus? Why can't they follow my instructions? Why are they having a trouble with this transition? They should be able to, but because of their history, they won't have the skills to be able to do that. So we will probably, with the kids that we serve that have experienced trauma, the kids in our lives that have experienced trauma, we will have to lower the bar from what we expect from them, of the behavior we expect from them, especially if we have not been intentional in teaching them some of these skills. We'll have to lower this bar, right? So our bar might be too high. Remember, their development is half their age. So if I have a 10-year-old and I have my bar up here of what a typical 10-year-old should be able to do, and the child tries to meet the bar and he fails. He tries to jump over it and he fails and he can't do it. I'm going to have to lower my bar to be closer to what maybe a 5-year-old can do, right? Keeping the child's history in mind. This is probably one of the questions that is most common that I get, so I wanted to add it in here. But when can I stop parenting like this, right? It usually sounds like that. Like, how long do I have to do this for? When can I raise my bar, right? When can I start treating them like, a preteen? When can I start treating them like an adult? Once the child has repeatedly jumped over and been successful at that bar that you've put for them, we can raise it up. And when we raise it up, we teach them, we help them, we teach them that skill, we help them through that skill. And once they're repeatedly successful at that, we can raise it up. And that's how we do it. Every time we praise them, every time they're successful, we acknowledge that, they've learned a new skill, that they're getting better at this, and then we teach them something new, and we raise the bar a little bit, I always like to use this example, but when we're teaching a child maybe to organize their toys or their shoes or something like that, it's very obvious when we raise the bar, right? First, think about it. They're really little and we pick up all their toys and we organize their room, right? And we don't expect them to help us. They're too little, right? And then they maybe become like a little bit like a toddler, maybe 3, something like that, 4, 5, that age range. We start saying, hey, come help mommy pick up the toys. And you know what we use? We use a pattern, and we use repetition, and we use rhythm, because we start singing a little song and everybody knows what we're supposed to do, and we put all the toys away. We raise the bar for the child, And then there comes a time, maybe the child, is 7, 8, 9, 10, something like that. And we say, hey, go put your shoes away and I'm going to go see that you did a great job, right? That is literally a parent raising the bar right there, little by little, praising the child, using rhythm and repetition to teach the child that new skill. And it's so natural for us when the child is younger, right? We can see it easily. But when we're in a relationship with a child that has experienced trauma and they're a little bit older, it will feel unnatural and a little bit more difficult for us to do that. And that's okay. Just work through the awkwardness. Find something creatively that is age appropriate to be able to work through this with the child. All right, so I would like you to think about, how do you now view a dysregulated child? How do you now view a dysregulated child? Pop that into the chat box. Has anything changed? Have you learned anything at all about what regulation is, what we can do, and what is really going on the inside of a child when they're dysregulated, right? How has your maybe traditional thinking of a child maybe throwing a tantrum or not following instructions, how has that changed, right? I want you to kind of reflect on that a little bit. Type it into the chat box. And I haven't done this really in any of these 3 webinars, but I thought I would just throw this in because this is something that I would do for my parents that I train, right? I'm going to challenge you to work on something. So however this plays into, the reason why you're here, whether it's professionally or at home, pick on something to work on. Are you going to work on connection and kind of being calm and transferring that calm and using some soft eye contact and watching your voice and your tone? Are you going to make a planning or a calming plan, or a soothing plan for your child and use some of that repetition and pattern and relationship in a rhythmic way? Or are you going to teach a skill? Right? Maybe you want to teach them a new skill, and use some of those short phrases that we saw. But I want to challenge you to kind of, after we finish up here, to take an action step. And what's going to be your action step? What are you going to do after our time together here? All right, and the last thing I wanted to mention before we do a little bit of Q&A is we have parent coaching every 2nd and 4th Thursday on our website, and that is for foster and adoptive parents. So if this is something that you like and you want to learn more about and you need more tools, go to our website and sign up for that. It's totally free. Another thing is we have an 8-week course coming up called Trauma Competent Caregiver, and this is for professionals using trauma-informed care in their work for foster, adoptive, or any kid that has experienced trauma. It's an 8-week course. It begins on October 7th. So if you're interested in learning more and really diving deep, I recommend this course. This is a course that really started me off on my journey, and we'll get to spend some time together and learn more together. The registration for this is also on our website, so make sure you look that up soon, because we start on October 7th. And that's all for me. So I think Jennifer is going to come back on and help us with some Q&A.
Well, hi, everybody, and thank you so much, Anna. For those of you who did not join us last time for Why Can't I Stay Calm as a Parent, one of the things I was really loving today as I was listening was the obvious overlap, right? Because this dysregulation is biological and it doesn't stop when you turn a certain age, right? And so both the recognition of our own dysregulation or a child's dysregulation and the answers to that in the moment and longer term are largely the same. And so I really loved that piece of thinking about the connections between the things we can do for a child that is dysregulated. It so often are the same things we can sort of do for ourselves if we notice ourselves, we're having those moments where we're not in the front of our brain in a particular moment. And sometimes those moments overlap, right? We have a dysregulated kiddo, and that either becomes part of our own dysregulation, or maybe we were already dysregulated too. And so this coping toolkit, tool belt approach has been so impactful as I've learned with Anna over the last few webinars. So if you have a Q&A, pop it into the Q&A box. We just have a couple, and we'll start there. But if you've thought of them now, we have a little bit of time. So one question, Anna, was if you have books to recommend on this topic. And I do appreciate you offering up the things y'all have on your calendar that are great opportunities for people to engage on this topic too. But what about books?
Yeah, one of my favorite books is The Connected Child, and that is by Dr. Karen Purvis, and that is the basics of what happens to a child who has experienced trauma, but also it's very practical for the parent or the person that wants to use this directly with a child. So it's going to offer a lot of tips, a lot of strategies, because it is an intervention for kids. And what I like most about this book is that it's easy to understand and read. Some other books can feel like a lot more clinical, and there's like big science terms when we talk about hormones and everything going on in the brain. But this book is really geared towards parents, so it's very practical, and I like it. So I would definitely start there.
Thank you. That's fabulous. And I don't know if I see another question. I'm going to skim back through the chat on it to be sure. One of the other things that really, as I'm looking, one of the other things that really jumped out for me today, and you've said it numerous times, is just that this isn't a quick fix. And since quick fixes don't work, that makes it easier to go a different way. But also that just this takes practice, right? As you said, for the kiddos, right? We can't skip a step, and there aren't really any shortcuts. And I would say that's true for us too, kind of in our journey at learning these skills. And I thought several times as you were speaking today about that quote that is, comparison is the thief of joy. And I thought about all the ways we might be comparing our kid to another kid, or our kid to what we thought would be happening during this phase, or even comparing ourselves today to some vision of what should be, or some previous or future version of ourselves, and just being really compassionate with ourselves and with the kids in our care as we sort of go on this journey together, and baby step toward better, one interaction at a time.
Yes, especially if we parent kids with trauma, comparing ourselves to other families or other kids or other parents. We're going to be very different and on a very different journey. So yes, thank you for mentioning that.
The other thing I love is that while I know in your work and in a lot of our work as well, we're focusing on kids who've had pretty significant trauma. And so we can fully understand why they might be dysregulated and that connection to prior events of their lives. We don't really have to understand where trauma might have come from, or even if there were trauma, to recognize a child that's dysregulated and for these tools to help. So I think about teachers in the classroom too, who don't have the whole life history on all their kids, but all of the things you talked about today would be so impactful for them to use when they see those signs in a kid that they may not know the history of. And It might not be easily explainable, but the tools still work.
Yes, that's so true. Especially just, if I were teaching right now, I used to teach before, but if I were teaching right now, I would probably just assume that all my kids are going to come back dysregulated, right? Not only have we just finished summer, but everything that has happened this school year is going to be, an alert in their brain that school is different, school's not the same. So we need to make sure that we're implementing that right now for kids across the board, right? Just regulation techniques.
Yeah, we got one question I want to throw out before we have to close, and that is, how can we use these tools virtually? Everything's different over Zoom. So
Yeah, I've been getting that question a lot. So I would say, virtually we want kids to feel safe, right? Again, we want to get them out of that brain. So couple of quick things I would first, before a child jumps on a call with anyone, especially if they don't know you, even if it's their doctor, if you could show them a picture of that person, like pull up their website, if they're going to have, like a new mentor, if they're going to, visit with someone, whoever it is, show them a picture, show them this is the person you're going to meet. This is what they look like before they're on the call. And have a good agenda of what's going to happen on the call and tell the child ahead of time, right? First, we're going to say hi, then we're going to play this game. Make sure it's structured, right? Whatever it might be, if it's a meeting with a mentor or a parent, whatever, it needs to be structured. We can't just put a kid for an hour in front of a call and think that they'll have so much to talk about. So let's use games. Let's be creative. Use your hands a lot on the call. For some reason, research shows that when people could see our hands, they feel safer with us because there's like no weapon in our hands. So I would say, watch your gestures, use your hands. And if the child can choose when they have the call, that could also be helpful. Like, you can give them two options. You can have your call on Thursday at 5 o'clock or on Friday at 5 o'clock. What do you choose? Because again, when they feel like they have a little bit of control, especially for those things they don't want to do, like doctor visits that are virtual now and therapy and that kind of thing, they can feel like they have a little bit more control, a little less fear, a little less threatened, and more able to be cooperative with you. So those are just some things that I would say, but we could talk longer about that, but those are a few things that I can implement right away.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I know we're out of time. Thanks to everyone who joined us for this episode, as well as prior episodes. And stay connected with Fostering Hope and Text Protects for future offerings on these topics. And whether you come at this as a parent, provider, professional, policymaker, we all want to be a resource to you in doing better by Texas kids. So thank you for your time today. Thank you, Anna, so much. And we look forward to seeing you again soon.